give us permission. If you don't want to be visible, you can turn your camera off. But this is a friendly, interactive seminar, and we'll post the video on YouTube afterwards for those that bought a ticket and weren't able to attend. This is going to be fun. This is going to be great fun. I'm pleased today. We have a very international setup. Actually, we've so far recognized we have 4 countries represented. We have South Korea, which is obviously the most important country when it comes to our conversation about Squid Game. We have England, we have Scotland, and we have Nepal. Is there anyone else from another country that would like to say hello and tell us where they are in the world? Jabez, where are you?
Hello, I'm from the Philippines, studying in Korea.
Oh, fantastic. Very good. Lovely to meet you. Are you from Manila?
Province near Manila.
Excellent. I've never been to the Philippines, but my family are from Malaysia, so I feel like we are connected somehow. There seems to be a good family relationship. That's great. Excellent. Is there anyone else here from a different country that you'd like to say hello?
There's a person from Canada in the chatting rooms.
Oh, is there? Hey, Canada. Very good. Whereabouts in Canada are you, Shu Yin?
Montreal.
Oh, lovely. So are you good at French?
I'm in the English university, working with university.
Oh, brilliant. Fantastic. Lovely to have InterVarsity staff with us. Great. Well, we thought there's this global phenomenon going on called Squid Game. And if you haven't seen it, there will be moments where you will need spoiler warnings because we will talk about some of the plot developments. So if you don't want to know what's going to happen, I have to remember to give you a spoiler alert. But we're analyzing this incredibly impactful TV series that is causing a global sensation. It's been a massive hit, surprise hit, I think, for Netflix. It's been their kind of most watched television show. It's bust out of just being watched in Korea. In fact, we'll be hearing from Korea during our time together to find out what the reception in its home country was. It's bust out of there and it's become a global sensation. In fact, it's such a global sensation that our school that some of my kids are in, I have 6 kids and they're all in very different schools, sent home a warning letter saying, don't let children watch this show. And I can kind of understand where they're coming from. This is definitely not a child-friendly TV show, but I don't think a blanket warning saying don't watch this show is the answer. I've seen quite a few kind of Christian groups arguing that no one in their right mind should be watching this television show. I'm going to take a kind of different angle and saying, look, there are certain shows that will trigger different kinds of people with all sorts of problems and issues. And so, yes, you need to be sensitive about what you watch. This is a pretty graphic and gruesome show. Although it's not an 18, it's not kind of in the Game of Thrones category of gratuitous violence, but it is disturbing. And, you know, you watch with caution. I'm not saying everybody should watch it. If you know this is an issue that you have, that violence is going to, trigger you in some way, of course, be careful. But as adults living in a kind of secularized, pluralistic world, there are great advantages in understanding our culture and finding ways to, I suppose, think about what we can learn about ourselves, our time, and this moment. And so, for me, engaging with a TV show like this is actually really helpful. I've got a slide deck actually that I'll talk you through as we go. But before we do anything else, I have to introduce you to our most important guest, which is Professor BJ Jun, who is joining us live from Seoul. And so we're delighted to have you here, BJ. BJ is very conscious about his English. He says he's a Korean first, and he's learned English later in life. I think when you meet him, you'll realize his English is brilliant and he has nothing to be embarrassed about. But we're really, really delighted that you're with us. It's not every day we get to meet a Korean professor. So BJ, just introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about your work, what you do in Seoul, and then I have a few questions for you.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is BJ Jun, working in South Korea, obviously joining from South Korea at the moment. Like Dr. Kandia introduced, I learned English when I was 21, and it was before I became a Christian. So I spoke much better than this when I was drunk, and and I picked up the language on the street in the Los Angeles area. So I always kind of joking of myself that my English is very broken, very Californian. But I mean, as long as communicable or kind of somewhat making people to understand what I'm trying to say, that's enough. Yep, I studied back in the States in psychology and theology and also cultural education. That was my educational background, and that's when I met Dr. Kandia through this Christian seminary at Georgia Fox University, and we kind of worked together for this one cohort, global leadership perspective. And since 2012, I came back to Korea, leaving my family behind the States. So I try to visit them twice a year. Luckily, we Korean professors have a very long vacation, like 5 months altogether. So that's my kids really envy. And Dad, I want to be a professor too.
That's
So
correct.
I teach Christian education and multicultural education and leadership here at this small Christian college called ACTS. Used to be Asian Center for Theological Studies and Missions. And we do have a lot of international students, and some of my students are joining this meeting right now. We have about 74, 76 students from 21 countries. So we are very international and try to make this seminar international as well. And
Brilliant.
I'm really surprised at this Squid Game phenomena, and I want to learn why, actually. So probably expecting Dr. Kandia will explain why what's going on in Europe.
Well, thank you, BJ. We're looking forward to hearing from you. I guess my first question to you is we are in the middle of something that commentators have described as the K wave. So we had K-pop, and that kind of kicked off with the incredible Gangnam Style that was a global hit. But we've surpassed that with the band BBS, which has been kind of a global sensation, #1 in many European countries. We had that. And then obviously Parasite was a huge global sensation, winning Best Film in the Oscars. And there are some really interesting similarities with Parasite and the Squid Game that we'll kind of think about thematically. But what do you think is going on? The biggest show in the world right now is a Korean television show. What's happening? Why is Korean culture spreading so far and wide? To full disclosure, I'm a Samsung phone user. So it's not just culture that's being spread around the world, it's products as well. The economy seems to be doing very well in exports. What's your take? Why has this happened? Is it sudden, or has it been building for a long time?
And to be honest, that's what I'm wondering about too. What's going on here? In terms of this cultural phenomena thing, I think it's in us. I mean, deeply rooted in our nature of the Korean people. Even like almost 5,000 years ago, there's a history book written by the Chinese people. They described Korean people, the people who are good at singing and dancing. It was recorded back in 4,000 years ago. And I think it's in us. It's very natural to enjoy the moment. The play thing is very, very important concept of the Korean people. And on top of that economic development probably, that really mattered a lot. And plus, the Korean government for a long time, they invested and tried to open or pave the way path for the entertainers to
Mm.
that's kind of political thing that they try to make something happen with the K-pop or K-wave thing. Since Kim Dae-jung government, probably it's been 20 years, and now we're seeing the fruit of those efforts.
Interesting. So it's a deliberate government investment program that spread at least Korean pop music around the world, and then
Right.
this kind of film narrative, that's a later development that maybe has ridden off
But
the
at the
back.
same time, we cannot really underestimate the cultural difference. For the Western or the Hollywood-made movies, they are focused on the characters or the persons, but especially the K-drama or Korean movies are focusing on the emotions, the
Yeah.
psychology, what's
Yeah.
really happening with the people, the relationship. I don't know whether you read the book by Richard Nishbat, the psychologist from University of Michigan, The Geography of Thought. There's a huge difference between the Asian people and the Western European people to perceive the outside the world. For example, let's say that there are monkey, banana, and a cow. And if you are to pair two up there, most European or Western people will pair the monkey and the cow together because they're animals. But the Asian people, including Chinese, Japanese, and Korean people, will pair the monkey with the banana because the monkey eats banana.
Yeah.
Now, because of the COVID, people could not travel outside the country. They felt like they're locked in. But this Squid Game everything was conducted in Korean language, felt very foreign. Just by watching it simply, making them feeling kind of traveling outside the country.
Mhm.
That's probably one of the reasons why the comparatively very short time, it made a big hit. Actually, it was released like September 17th or 19th or something. So it's a little more than a month now. And then it hit the #1 all over the world. And,
Yes.
and it's quite a phenomenon.
That's right. It's really helpful. Interestingly, we're seeing a focus globally on race disparity and racism. Some of that has been accelerated by what happened with George Floyd. In America, there was a kind of global ripple, wasn't there, as people began to think about race and racism. And so for me, I don't know, I'd be interested what you think, but I find it quite encouraging that a global smash hit made by Koreans, probably for originally Koreans, is finding such a positive response around the world. Do you feel like we're overcoming something around xenophobia with this? Because it hasn't always been that Southeast Asian culture has been appreciated as much as it is at the moment.
I don't think this one masterpiece will change the entire global environment at
Sure.
once, but I think it is a pretty good and powerful breakthrough to kind of giving us little bit of proud that okay, we can probably put that down. But is it a cultural element or the money power? I there's something that I cannot really agree with what you said about the show, that it was not originally made for the Korean audience actually.
Okay.
Although everything was recorded in Korean language, but it was invested by the Netflix, which is the global company, global money, and probably they intentionally made it in Korean language, but aiming for the global audiences, not for the Korean. In fact, it is not that popular in Korea. Korean people, I mean, because this kind of show, the same Parasite, like a Parasite, we are very used to that kind of story plot and the elements and character playings. Everything is very usual to us. So it is very unusual for us to see the global arc really kind of surprised by this. We're surprised by this phenomena, actually.
Fascinating. Okay, really helpful. we're now going to kind of begin to zoom in to Squid Game as a TV show. We've kind of set it within its kind of wider cultural context. And BJ, you watched it very recently in order to help us with this seminar. Thank you for doing that. As a Korean watching Squid Game, what do you think Westerners need to know about Korean culture in order to better appreciate the TV show? What is it that those of us that have never visited Korea need to know about Korea in order to understand the show a bit better?
For that question, can I invite one of my very closest friend, who is also a pastor and a sociologist, but he studied in German, so he might answer to that question in German or Korean so that I can translate.
Okay.
조 교수님, 한국에 한 번도 방문한 적이 없는 특히 영국 사람들, 외국인들이 이 오징어 게임만 보고서는 한국을 판단할 수도 있는데 그 한국 문화라든지 이런 거 한국 사회에 대해서 이해하기 쉽게 좀 도와주려면 한국에 대한 어떤 부분들을 아는 게 도움이 될까요?
네. 한국 사람들은 가족을 중시 여깁니다. 유교적인 전통입니다. 사회의 가장 기본 단위가 가족입니다.
So you have to understand the Confucius background of the Korean society, which is focused on the family. Everything is family-centered.
여러분들이 보셨을 이번 오징어 게임도 마찬가지였고, 아니면은 기생충도 마찬가지였고, 미나리도 마찬가지였고, 근본적인 모든 문화의 기본이 다 이제 가족으로 되어 있습니다.
As you see from the Squid Game, Parasite, or even Minari, the Hollywood, the winning award-winning movie, it's all focused on deeply rooted in family. And those participants or players of the Squid Game, they fought or they played the game for the family, not for themselves, actually.
그게 한 축이고 또 한 축은 뭐냐면 이 사회가 너무 빠르게 특히 이제 경제적으로 우리가 빠르게 성장을 하다 보니까 모든 부분에서 이 경쟁이 심각합니다.
Because of the rapid growth of the society, especially the financially or economically developed too fast, and then it became so competitive. So there is a naturally economic inequality occurred as a result of competition.
그래서 한국이 살기는 참 좋은데 한쪽에서는 자살률이 세계에서 1위에 속합니다.
And it is really surprising that Korea became a very advanced country, like wealthy country now, but number one in suicide rate in OECD, among the OECD countries.
그게 정말 죽기까지 열심히 살지 않으면 이곳에서 생존하기가 힘든 상당히 사는 게 참 이렇게 어려운 그런 사회라는 걸 봐야 될 것 같습니다.
Literally, it is one of the characters said it is a hell here. Literally, it is a hell to survive. Otherwise, you're just living in a hell. So they work so hard to death to get out of that hell. That was the survival game. These are the two key points to keep in mind as we watch the Korean movies or understanding the Korean society.
처음에 우리가 자랄 때만 해도 모든 희망이 있었는데 요즘 젊은 사람들은 결국 이 경쟁에서 밀려나면서 희망을 잃고 있는 그런 사회를 살고 있습니다.
So briefly, he summarized that today's Korean society, when we grew up during our childhood, we used to have a hope and dream. But these young people in this society in this time have no hope, hopeless. So they're literally living in a physical hell here.
지금 성장이 된 이후에 성장이 더 이상 없는 사회를 산다라는 것이 우리들에게 지금 익숙하지 않은 힘든 상황입니다.
What makes us more frustrated is that because of that rapid growth, no more growth is available. So everyone is in frustrated status at this time.
이 정도 얘기하면 될 것 같습니다.
Yeah, that's about it.
Thank you very much. Really helpful. I love the way that technology can bring us together, that we can get expert analysis from a South Korean sociologist to help us as we think about this television show. So really, really lovely to have you with us. Let me present a few ideas about what I'm seeing as I watch this television show, and then we'll open it up for some questions and discussions, and that can be international, wherever you are in the world. Feel free to give us your views on this. But let me start by providing, I suppose, a way that I think about how Christians can engage with culture. So let me just think about that with you, where you are sharing your screen. Good. Hopefully you can see my screen play. Here we go. All right, can you see this? Great. So at one level, culture can be a really helpful window. If you've never visited Korea and you have no idea about this social economic disparity, we're seeing that, aren't we? It's giving us an opportunity to look into another culture and see what's going on, and that's fascinating. That makes the world a smaller place. I like to watch international movies, not just ones from America, and those that are made by local people. It just gives me a way to understand the world. I get a window, and I think, as BJ said, with lockdown and maybe even with the COP26 event happening this week, where we might be rethinking international air travel. And so that means we're more reliant on culture, and culture could be a television program, a movie, a book, an opera, but we're more reliant on culture to give us a window to see how other people and other cultures work. And I think there is a kind of longing in us to connect globally and to find out what's going on. And that's very healthy. But I think culture can also be a mirror, that even if I'm looking at somebody else's culture, I might be understanding something about my own circumstances and situation. It might be something that resonates as I watch something. I think, oh, you know, I can relate to that. That's my experience too. That helps me understand who I am. I didn't understand why I'm feeling that way, but this cultural artifact, this book, this novel, this film, this song really speaks to me, and I can understand something more about myself as a result, which I think is also very, very healthy. Culture can also be a bridge, and I guess that's how I want to think about it a little bit today. I'm doing a little series in my town. I live just outside of Reading, and we're doing a survey of the people in our little town to find out what is our town's favorite movie. Actually, I'm kind of aiming at the top 5. And from finding out the top 5 movies in my town, I'm going to put on a series of Sunday evening talks. And it will be, you know, whatever the movie is, let's say No Time to Die, the new James Bond movie. I will talk about Jesus and No Time to Die. Normally when I do that survey, The Shawshank Redemption comes up very high on the list. It's normally in the top 3 of the International Movie Database. So Jesus and The Shawshank is another talk that I do. And it can be a bridge, that the questions and ideas and concerns and worries that our culture has are presented in a movie, and I can use that as half of the bridge to show how my understanding of the Christian message can fulfill or connect or challenge some of the ideas that are present in that film. And sometimes that bridge is really easy, like in the film The Shawshank Redemption. You know, the Bible and some of the whole ideas about redemption are right at the core of that film. And all I do is just join the dots and help build that other bridge and to show how the Christian faith connects. Sometimes culture is an echo. It echoes an idea that is already present in the Bible, and that cultural artifact kind of writes it louder. So, for example, let's take the film Finding Nemo. Finding Nemo is a homecoming film, isn't it? It's a story about a lost son who gets himself into a lot of trouble, and of a father's incredible journey, going whatever lengths are needed in order to rescue his son. That's very close to a big story in the Bible of the prodigal son, isn't it? That there is a son that gets very lost and a father that will go to incredible lengths in order to welcome him home. And sometimes culture can act as what C.S. Lewis describes as a thin space. So if you remember the series of novels or children's books that Lewis wrote were the Narnia Chronicles. And the Narnia Chronicles were about children who moved or kind of were transported from our world to another world, I suppose a more heavenly world that somehow had also gone through a fall. That's theologically complicated. And one of the ways through was through a wardrobe, through make-believe. You know, these kids imagining they're going through a wardrobe, they're using their imaginations. Oh, and they've ended up in another land completely. And so Lewis was talking about the idea that through our imagination, through our exploration of culture, we might connect, we might have a moment of transcendence to connect with God himself. The same idea happens when in the Voyage of the Dawn Treader, the kids are just transfixed by a beautiful painting of a massive ship on the ocean. And again, it was through meditating or looking at that picture, they're transported to another world. And I think for some of us, movies and opera and music can actually give us a moment of transcendence so that we can realize there's more to the world than meets the eye, and that can help us connect with God. So I think culture can be any of those things. But let me ask this as a question to you. As you were watching Squid Game, or as you're considering watching a Squid Game, which ones of those 5 ways that culture works, and that's not an exhaustive list, which way does Squid Game work for you? Does it connect with any of those areas that we've described, the way that culture can function for Christians? But how did it speak to you? What did Squid Game do to you? Why are you here? Why are you having a conversation with us about Squid Game, faith, hope, and horror? Let's have a little moment where anyone can contribute. Does anyone want to make a comment?
Yeah, I haven't watched it, Krish, but I've been very interested to find out. For example, the thing that drew me when I heard that this was happening was the school, whatever, the local authority that had written to all the head teachers to say, please don't let, and I'm thinking, why? I haven't seen it. I've got no idea apart from the headlines. So I thought, this is on, let's check this out. I'm not in schools today with it being half term. Yeah. And it's been helpful to just listen to some of what's going on. And one of the things I try to do when I visit schools is look at parallels. And so, you know, you just mentioned like the story of the lost son. And so for me, if I'm telling that story in an assembly, I may or may not relate it to if there is a program. So I don't know if I'm going to watch any of this Squid Game also, because I've got no idea how to get hold of Netflix, but this is a very, you know, I suppose I could ask Chris, he could help me out. But so yeah, that's why I'm here, is just to find out a little bit more. Yeah,
that's interesting. Banning Squid Game by teachers is probably the surest fire way to make sure as many children as possible watch it. That seems to happen with the Bible in many countries, isn't it? As soon as a communist dictatorship decided they were going to ban the Bible, demand for the Bible kind of increased lots and lots. Look, it has got an age rating. I think it is 15 in the UK. I don't know what it is in other parts of the world. And I'm quite strict in my household about age ratings. And even some age ratings that are 15s, I don't let my 15-year-old watch, but it's a good indicator for me. So I'm not going to encourage anyone under 15 to be watching this TV show. But if they have watched it, then I might want to kind of build that bridge, as you're so good at doing in schools. Someone else want to make a comment? Yeah, John.
Yeah, I've got a question, if that's okay, for BJ. Forgive me, this question does contain an element of spoilers, so sorry for anyone else, but it struck me, I have watched the whole series, and there does seem to be a message about Christianity running through the whole series. And I mean, we mentioned about the 2 hells. There's the hell of the Squid Game, there's the hell of the outside world. there's the selfish, what I call the selfish or warped Christian who's in the Squid Game, who's always praying, and it's always incessantly annoying to the other players. And then there's the street preacher in the very last episode who finds the main character on the street. So I was wondering, do you think, BJ, that there is a message Squid Game is trying to communicate about how the world views Christianity?
Definitely so. So in that perspective, in that aspect, but among 5 of about the cultures Dr. Candia briefly mentioned, I think this Squid Game played a kind of mirror thing that reflects today's today's description, or how the world, not only the Korean society, but globally, how they see us is kind of mirrored into, or somehow saturated into the episodes. For example, the Christian people are the most selfish people in that game. And today, why it became so difficult to share the gospel with other people, before this kind of economic crisis and other social phenomena misconduct by the Christian people happened in Korean society, it was pretty simple for us to share the gospel with other people that believe in Jesus and you will be like me. But we can't do that anymore. I don't want to believe in Jesus because I don't want to be like you. We don't set up a good example to the non-believing world at all. And that is exactly described and absorbed into that show, I guess.
It's very interesting, isn't it? I think I read somewhere that 30% of Koreans go to church, and Korea had at one stage, I don't know if it's still true, the largest church in the world, Yoido Full Gospel Tabernacle.
Used to be 25% of the Korean populations are considered to be Christians, but not anymore. It dropped a lot of, so there were a lot of unchurched people before, but we call those people who left the church as a dechurched people. We have about 1.5 million dechurched people these days.
Wow. So you are experiencing, I guess, as we have in the West, nominal Christianity, people that claim to be Christians, but are not necessarily living out that faith. And that seems to be the critique that's going on with this particular one character that's always praying. And yet when it comes to, compassion, kindness, self-sacrifice, none of that is there. So this disconnection, and rightly people are angry at that. That comes across a lot in Western television around how the church is portrayed. It's normally, the vicar is probably sleeping around or stealing money or is hypocritical. So that can be the stereotype of Western Christian leaders. And it's interesting to see that kind of same theme pop up within Squid Game. We haven't talked about Kim's Convenience, which is one of my favorite television programs, which is also a Korean program, but about Korean expats living in America, Canada, sorry. And the church comes across very well. These people do turn up at church. They're fun people. You want to spend time with them. They're real. They wrestle with all sorts of issues, and yet their Christian faith is an important part of who they are. And it's not.
Well, I heard that show was directed by non-Korean though.
Yes. And I don't know how you felt about this. The main character, who's now a Marvel hero, is actually not Korean. He's Chinese. And so you've got Chinese people playing Korean roles. Is that seen to be a problem in Korea? Is that socially acceptable, or how does that work?
Not pretty much, actually. It is not acceptable. One of the characters in the Squid Game, the Pakistani labor immigrant, Actually, he's Indian. So that became a huge issue among the Indian, Pakistan people and Indian people too,
Okay.
actually. I heard.
Yeah.
The Indian played the Pakistan in the show, just like that. And Chinese people playing a Korean guy in a show, well, the Korean people will not accept it.
Yeah, fascinating. Very good. Okay, we've got some more big themes we want to pull out, but does anyone else want to make a comment or a question? What drew you, or what has challenged you about this show so far? Dave, good to see you. Dave, you want to say something?
Could do briefly. Yeah, we watched the whole show mainly because we've got daughters in their 20s and they and their friends were all talking about it. And so we thought we better see what's going on. And I found it, I mean, it's deeply dystopian, deeply disturbing in many ways. I think, you know, the hell within the game and the hell in the real world that's been talked about is there. In some ways, I felt it was both an insight into Korean culture, but also a comment on more global culture and the kind of the emptiness of capitalism, the gap between rich and poor, the breakdown of family, the pressure of money. And I think there are themes there that are universal, that are there and that we can maybe not comment on in a too obvious way, Christian-wise, but we can certainly talk about the fears and hopes that there are in a series like that and how those link to what the gospel has to say about our fears and hopes.
That's really helpful. Let's pick up on that a little bit, Dave. I've got some little vignettes of characters, and again, spoiler alert, if you haven't seen the show, I'm going to share stuff that happens in the show. Otherwise, it won't be very easy to have a big discussion about it. So the big theme for those of you that are new to this television program is there is a recruitment on the streets of Seoul for desperate people who might be willing to do things for money, and the recruitment process is to play a game. I can't pronounce the game that he plays, but you're throwing a piece of card on the floor, and depending on which way it turns up, whether you win the game or not. And basically the way that this recruiter goes about, and he's on the streets or he's on the subways, he's looking for lonely people, and basically if you lose the game, then he'll hit you in the face as hard as he can. And if you win the game, then he gives you money. So it's almost like a test. You know, what are you willing to do for money? You pass the test if you're willing to, you know, be humiliated or be physically hurt in order to, earn some money. And that's how the recruitment goes. So people get recruited in, and they don't know at this stage what the game is going to involve, but they sign up to it and they get drugged in a car and then taken to a mysterious island somewhere out in the ocean. And then they play the first game, and the first game is pretty terrible. It's a children's game of red light, green light, which I think we've got the equivalent of, which is what's the time, Mr. Wolf? Is that our closest equivalent in the UK? Or is it Grandmother's Steps? Have you heard of that one? You're supposed to sneak up on people. There's a guy or a girl up on the wall, and they turn around, and if you're moving when they turn around, you're normally out of the game. Well, not in Squid Game. If you are moving when this robot child turns around, you get shot. And that's the moment that people realize, oh my goodness, this is murder, this is mayhem, this is terrible. And that's the first game. And then a few people decide that this is terrible and that they ought to be allowed to leave, and they have a vote. And for me, this is when the kind of horror part of the show actually kicks in. They have a vote about whether to stay in the game or not. And everyone says, right, we're going to leave. And they go back to the streets, they go back to their lives. And everyone re-volunteers to go back in, having been out on the streets of Korea. So this is where this economic inequality comes in that we've been talking about. People are so desperate that they would rather come back to a game where they could be murdered because they have more chance of life. Let me show you a little quote that came here. This is from player 2-2. Actually, weirdly, I can't read it because I've covered it, but I don't have a, oh, can you read it? I can't read it. Hang on. There he is. I don't have a home to go back to. At least in here, I stand a chance, but out there, I've got nothing. So this idea of absolute economic deprivation, it's linked in the show with gambling as well. And again, I'd love to know from our Korean friends how much a problem, catastrophic gambling debt is in Korea, or is that something of the fiction of the television show? So the economic challenge is there. But let me zoom in on another character here. This is Deok-soo. Excuse my pronunciation if that's wrong. A few people have mentioned this word hell. There's an episode called Hell. We're in hell here. There's no rules in hell. And for Deok-soo, that's good news because he is a gangster on the outside world. He murders people. He's doing drug deals. And now that all rules are off, he's in his element. And he leads the first kind of night of terror, which is the version of the Purge, where everybody goes around murdering everybody else because they're trying to increase their chances of winning the game, which will give them lots of money. So this perception that it's bad out there, it's bad in here, but in hell, the strong survive because there are no rules. Everything is permissible if God does not exist. Does that sound like a quote from Dostoevsky, the brothers Karamazov? That's how this kind of gets worked out in this television show. But
sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah, go for
it. Isn't it interesting that the first time they were recruited, but the second time they volunteered, knowing that there is a hell waiting for them?
Yes.
But just like Doksu, the number 322 said, they volunteered, although they know that there will be hell waiting for them because of that chance.
Yes.
Because of the chance. That chance might be mine. Out of 456 people, I may be that chance. That reminds me of the Bible story that this one, the crippled guy waiting in front of this well.
Yes.
One time moving, storing up, the angel came down to the earth and then storing up the well. Only one time a year, he's been waiting in front of that well for 38 years. For that one moment, 38 years. And sometimes the Christianity became so competitive religion that they are looking for that chance and coming to church, not really believing the gospel, but just looking for that chance in the church. This is the place that church must really intervene. We have to explain what the real gospel power is. So gospel is not just looking for one chance, it's open to everyone. Not only one of you, among 456 people will be saved, but every and each one of you will be saved by entering into this game.
That's really helpful, BJ. It is the horror for me that they voluntarily entered hell because life was so bad outside that it was worth being in a murderous game to win this incredible prize, which I think only translates to about £25 million. I mean, that's still a lot of money, but the amount of things people are willing to do in order to win that money that they see as their salvation, that's their way out of debt, it's their way out of despair, or some of them are doing it as the other professor mentioned, for family reasons. They want to kind of get their kids back. A lot of people, this is just their way out of their economic hell, is to find this salvation, and I'll do whatever I can to get it. It's a really interesting idea about hope. We have a national lottery in the United Kingdom, and many people will spend a lot of money in the hope that they will be the person picked out of obscurity to win the money. and we are seeing a rise in gambling and addictive gambling, particularly amongst the poor. We had a huge issue with slot machines that were very expensive and again very unlikely to give you a return. So this whole show is showing, I guess, the despair that there is and the way that gambling, even though it might have got you into a lot of trouble, is still seen to be a solution, isn't it, to get out of it? So there's some critique there. Korean friends, is it an issue in Korea? Is this a current social issue? Are Koreans struggling with gambling like we are over here in the West?
조 박사님, 한국 사회가 이게 도박 중독 사회라고 봐도 될까요? 그렇진 않죠.
그렇진 않습니다. 그러니까 우리는 도박이라는 개념은 도박은 그렇게 성행되어 있지 않습니다.
Actually, he says it is not the gambling issue. Actually, gambling is not that big in Korea. Actually, it is a kind of fiction thing there. But because some people might have gotten into the gambling because of the economic problem, the financial problem, but they're in debt not because of the gambling, but because of they lost their job or they just got the. I just read an article or statistic about the debt of the Korean people. If you sum up together, it's more than 100% of the GDP.
Wow.
So the family debt or individual debt is so high, not because of the gambling. Gambling is a very minor social problem here in Korea.
That's fascinating.
말씀 더하면 한국 사람들은 내가 노력하면 기회를 잡을 수 있다고 다들 생각을 합니다.
In Korean society, it's kind of merit-oriented society. For example, if you try hard, you will get a chance someday. That this kind of common mentality for the Korean people.
한국에 소상공인들이 많습니다. 가게를 하는 사람들,
So
음식점이.
there are a lot of small business owners in Korean society.
월급을 받아서가 내가 부자가 되겠다기보다는 내가 뭔가 열심히 해서 기회를 받아가지고 나도 성공할 수 있다라는 생각은 갖고 있습니다.
So the reason there are small business owners more than the salarymen or office people is because if I work hard on my own, I can be rich. This kind of hope for the small business owners.
근데 이런 그 스몰 비즈니스가 1년이면은 50%가 망하고 3년이면은 80%가 망해 나가요. 그게 결국 이거 자체가 하나의 도박이죠.
Problem is that getting into the small business world is another form of gambling, actually, because they loan the money from the bank to start their business.
Wow.
But 50% of the startups are going bankrupt in first year, and 80% of the startups are going bankrupt in 3 years.
Wow.
So they're going into not just doing a gambling, but they're doing business gambling in that way.
It's fascinating. Thank you again, professors. Again, this parasite overlap, that the gap between those that have and those that have not was a really important theme in that film. And the idea that this poor family who are scratching a living using any means that they can managed to get in amongst the rich and work their way out like an insect building a colony within a kind of healthy environment. That theme is here again in Squid Game, isn't it? This gap between the rich and the poor, and what the poor are willing to do in order to kind of get a look into the rich's world. I found that very, very interesting. And the kind of chilling quote, another horror moment for me, and again, spoiler alert, please cover your ears. It turns out one of the players is actually behind the whole thing. And he's fabulously rich, but has created this whole world basically because he's bored. And he says this: do you know what someone with no money has in common with someone with too much money? Living is no fun for them. No matter what you buy, eat or drink, everything gets boring in the end. So how about that for dashing hopes? You know, so the poor aspire to be the rich. They'll try to climb out of the dark world into the light. That was a big theme in Parasite. They're trying to scrape a living. They're hoping they're going to hit the big time with their business gambling you've been talking about, BJ. But if they hit the big time, here's what people at the top tell you: it's boring up here, and we're going to create new ways to distract ourselves. You can kind of see that echoing out in our wider culture as our billionaires are so bored they think, I know, I'll just start a space program for something to do. So this does seem to resonate with the way that our culture's going. But how does the church offer an alternative to this incredibly dystopian picture of money and wealth and poverty and hope? We've got a very different approach, and yet sometimes the church compromises and ends up rebaptizing this culture of social climbing with something we describe as the prosperity gospel, where we tell the poor that if you not work hard enough, but maybe pray hard enough or believe hard enough, you too can come out of this difficult pit and God will bless you with riches. So I think we, the church, again, this mirror, we need to think about our approach to money and wealth and prosperity in light of scripture, and not allow a culture of social climbing to kind of shape the way the church presents itself. That's always a challenge, isn't it, when it comes to connecting our gospel with the culture. We don't just want to adapt the gospel so it suits the culture. That's a real challenge. But did anyone else have comment to make about the kind of socioeconomic piece here? Because some commentators have been saying this is a critique in general of consumer capitalism. It doesn't work. It doesn't create a nice society. It ends up being dog eat dog, winner takes all, zero-sum game. And this Squid Game is just another way of looking at the wider economic culture in general. Does anyone else have a view or a comment or a question that relates to that? Yeah, John, go for it.
Sorry, I know I've said something already, but it just kind of spoke to me about actually people are looking for a way out. People are looking for salvation. And actually, it's actually quite clever because, you know, Il Nam, who's supposedly set up this whole thing, is kind of highlighting that money isn't the answer. So he's almost playing with all these people saying that actually you think this is the thing, but actually it's not. And so people are left with the question of, well, what is the way out then? What is salvation? And obviously you've got that street preacher there saying you need Jesus, which is kind of meant to be almost mocking him in a way. But I think there could be almost a subtle message in there that there is something.
That's really helpful, John. Thank you. Anyone else want to make a comment? Oh, Dave, go for it.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, really. Again, bit of a spoiler alert, but there's one episode where there's a bunch of super rich kind of billionaires who come in as spectators to watch the game, and they all wear animal masks, which I think is quite symbolic. It's in itself, and they're amongst, in a sense, the worst characters in the whole thing, and they're top of the pile of this economic game. So I think there is a deep critique of the economic system and what it fails to give. They're the most soulless of the lot in some ways, who just there purely for their own pleasure, but not really getting a lot of pleasure out of it anyway. But in terms of what we can offer in answer to the questions that a series like this gives, we've just been studying the book of Acts in our local church and looking at Acts 2, looking at the early church there. Genuine community, genuine shared lives, caring for each other, being prepared to actually sacrificially sell property and help others in need. at a local level, it's so counter the values of our kind of individualistic capitalism.
Yeah.
And it's so counter the values of the kind of commercialized version of Christianity that it's just what it's in it for me selfishly. It's my salvation, it's my Jesus, it's my money, etc. It's about community. And that it seems to me is something that, you know, it's more than family. It's about this new community that we find in Christ, and how that can be lived out. And that's what's so needed, and sadly what the church doesn't always manage to convey.
Yes, really helpful. And there are hints of that, I think, even in this show. One of my favorite relationships, and it comes in probably the most, I don't know, emotionally gut-wrenching episodes. Do you remember this? You have a reason to leave this place, but I don't. So that there's a game towards the end where everyone's put into, or encouraged to get into, teams of 2, and everyone's choosing their best friends to kind of be with, because it's all about solidarity. And then the evil trick is actually you're against your friend. Only one of you is going to get to survive, and you play a game of marbles in order to decide who is going to live and who is going to die. And this brings out the worst in almost everybody, including the kind of main character, who uses apparently an elderly person's senility to trick them into losing the game. Or again, someone we might have thought was a reasonable character ends up tricking a person who, the Pakistani kind of manual laborer. He tricks him out of life as well. So everyone's kind of in it for themselves. It's kind of Machiavellian. It's dog eat dog, winner takes all. And then you get this relationship between these 2 women. One is someone who's escaped from North Korea. And weirdly, you know, so desperate that she's entered into another kind of dictatorship, which is interesting. And the other is a young woman who was abused by, I think it was a church pastor, which is another critique of Christianity. And you know, that's where you get this kind of, these 2 people have very little in common. They form a friendship, and one sacrifices her life in order to give life to the other one. And it's a little bit of light in a very dark place. It reminds me of the Shawshank Redemption, that you know, in a very dystopian dark space, hope, grace, sacrifice really shines brightly. And so I think I want to reinforce Dave's point there, that, you know, this is a critique of our current culture, and not just Korean culture, but global consumer capitalism, and what it's doing to us, and what it's doing to our relationships, what it's doing to our families. And there, in the middle of that, a genuinely lived out gospel is going to speak very powerfully. My doctoral supervisor died last week. His name was Andrew Walker, and I was studying Leslie Newbegin's work with him. And Newbegin said that the best hermeneutic of the gospel, or the best expression of the gospel, is a church that's living it out. You know, it's as those words take form in a visible, self-sacrificial community, that's when the gospel shines. And you see that in this show, because a lot of people say the right things about Jesus, they even pray, but it's not embodied in a group of people that are trying to live that out. And so I think this show gives us an important challenge, doesn't it? Are we going to genuinely live out the supernatural sociology of the gospel that is about welcoming the poor, the needy, those that society rejects, and including them in our team? That's a fascinating element of this program too, is that everyone gets to get in teams, and the weak and the women and the poor and the uneducated, they are rejected because they're not going to be any good for our team to win. The church takes the complete opposite view and says, come to me, all who are weary, heavy laden, you know, go into the highways and byways and bring the poor and the lame and the sick, bring them in. because for such as these was the kingdom of God. So the supernatural sociology of the gospel has a real opportunity to shine in the midst of a kind of Squid Game world. I think it's some fascinating ideas present. Oh man, we've had a very rich conversation.
Right.
I want to
Can
give
I
my
add
Korean
one
friends.
final thought?
Yeah, please. I was just going to offer that to you.
Yes, I think I really appreciate this kind of setting so that we globally get together, talk about the gospel, the role of the church, what it means to be a church in this society. I like to suggest one or two things at this moment. That number one, it is the time for us to reinterpret the gospel and also re-explain the gospel power to the non-believing society. The second thing that I like to suggest or kind of throw in at this table is that because this Korean drama gave us a very unique way of questions, actually. And that means that we all have said that the gospel or the church has moved from global north to global south. But still, the theology is really dominated by the global north still. So it is time for us to discuss about the global south theology or in different perspectives about the understanding the gospel and the church's role. So if we can get together from this global perspective, but with the one Holy Spirit given lens, then we will probably come up with the common answer to all these universal or global issues, I believe.
That's really helpful, BJ. We're cheering you on with that, and we're really grateful that you'd spend time with us. I think it's nighttime for you, so we appreciate your time, and thank you, Professor Cho, as well. Lovely to see you. We've enjoyed our time together. This will be available as a recording. I'll email it round to you when I've uploaded it to YouTube. And watch your inbox for further opportunities to discuss faith and film and culture, and just to enjoy each other's company. So thanks everyone for being here today. Looking forward to seeing you face to face soon. I missed my Korean barbecue, actually.
Hey, come and visit. I'll invite you.
I'm coming. It's great. All right, have a lovely day, everyone. God bless you all.
Thanks,
God bless
Krish.
you. Bye now.
Thanks.
Dave, are you in Glasgow next week?
Me?
Yeah.
I'm up there next weekend, so in a week's time. I'm not
Okay.
going for the whole conference, but just up for the weekend.
I'm there Sunday to Monday, so I think I'll miss you, but yeah.
Okay, yeah. Oh, well, I hope it goes well.
Thank you. Thanks for joining
Yeah,
us.
I'm sure we got lots of mutual friends up there too. Yeah.
Great. All right. God bless everyone.
Bye.